welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is in response to a listener's question. Another baby? ? Yes or no? So that's what we're going to dive into and dismantle thought processes along trying to decipher whether it's a full-bodied yes or a very conscious no. So before we do that, I would love to remind you to jump into nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner and sign up to join our tribe, where once every so often we send you out an email with everything that we put out in the world. And I decided yesterday I'm going to work on getting better at that, Bridget. So look out. I'm going to work on getting better at the newsletter.
Look out, Pete.
So if you would love a little more love in your inbox around being able to be more gentle with yourself by virtue of understanding a bigger picture than where you find yourself, not simply just gentle, 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 because, you know, that's not how we roll. It's more, let's look bigger and find the moment of the heart opening equilibration that gives you the sensation of awe and peace and purpose. So if you would love a little bit more of that, then please join our tribe at nourishingthemother.com.au and we will appear in your inbox every so often.
And I would love to also thank the latest beautiful people who have signed up to be a patron of the podcast via Patreon. So thank you, Alicia, Christina, and also Sarah. And we have just added in our latest quick reference guide. So whether you choose the $3 or the $8 a month support level, you'll get access to monthly quick reference guides, which will help you along parenting, relationship, and personal growth in your mothering journey. So check those out if you're a patron.
And here we are streaming again. So also apologies in advance that our sound quality will diminish when we're not able to be in a mic set up together. So here we are back in Melbourne lockdown for COVID with the second wave. So we're back to streaming together. So please bear with the reduction in sound quality as we do our best to work with that and around that. And if you're in Seek More, then you have this live streamed as a visual. So we really hope if you're a visual learner and you just love to interact and feel that level of energy with watching our faces and interactions and behind the scenes faux pas, then enjoy.
There's always those. So Julie,
I'm going to read it.
In front of you.
Yeah, I am. I would love to say thank you to this listener who wrote in a question. And we do love your questions. If you have a question or a podcast suggestion, we would love it. We would welcome it. We would love to be able to navigate the conversation to where is meaningful for you. So please drop us a DM, a PM or an email or whatever feels good if there's something that you would just love to hear us riff on. So thank you to this beautiful listener. Hello, lovely ladies. Your podcast has meant the world to me this past year as my second turned one. I'm so grateful for everything you've taught me. I'd love an episode with some guidance on how to navigate making the decision on whether to have a third. All my friends are at 2. Most want 3, but no one is sure whether they can manage it, whether they'll be ruining the beauty and peace in what they've already got. But also, no one knows how to let go of the desire for a third and move into the next chapter. So given their lack of guidance, I once again turn to you. What do I need to consider? How do I know it's a full-bodied yes? Sending all my love and gratitude. Thank you. There you go. It's a beautiful message, wasn't it?
It really was.
So, Bridget, before we jumped on this call, you had this memory drop in of a moment when you had little tiny baby Sylvie, who was baby number 2, in a sling at 3 weeks old at the Wellness Summit. Do you want to walk us through that memory?
Yeah, I do. So, because it's funny when you've kind of moved past this stage, it can be harder to put yourself back there. So I said, "Come on, Julie, you remember, don't you?" And Julie doesn't remember this.
I don't, but it's not meaningful for me, right? There's a reason that we hold memory. Yeah, it's not random.
Yeah, exactly. So we were speaking to a female chiropractor actually there, and she was talking about how she'd love another. She'd had 2 already, and you're going, "Go on, like it's amazing, like there's always room for more." And I had 3-week-old Sylvie in the sling, my second, and I was thinking, "No, I think I'm done." And it's so funny because I thought, well, I wasn't done, right? Because I have a third. And I think that this is part of that, that we evolve as mothers, and we evolve and shift and change in our values and what's most meaningful to us. So we can have all of the ideas in the world about what's the right number of children and how many we want and where we want to stop. But if we get too stuck in a belief about how it needs to be, we don't get a chance to really allow ourselves to open up to the desire of what it could be. So I would like to preface before we deepen into this that allow yourself, a little bit like that Rumi quote. He says, allow yourself to be pulled by your deepest desire. It will not lead you astray. I think that's paraphrased, but that was really what I felt into when I was making those decisions, was like, there's something here I just don't feel done. And my husband would have been very happy to be done at 2 at that time. But I really didn't feel like I was done. And so I gave myself, or asked, like a really 6 to 8 month period of conversation and conscious work around our edges with that decision. And then I had in my head that if we couldn't come to some kind of agreement or some kind of place where we were pregnant in that time, then I would be willing to look beyond having a third and, look to like what else I could have met in my life that would give me fulfillment. But ultimately we came to that decision together to have a third, and that happened quite quickly after that. So how do you know? I think you have to get really still and be really willing to listen and make space often for the conflict, right? Like the part of you that says, oh, but like my life, I'm ticking all these boxes here and it works really well and the house is perfect for 2 and our resources fit and support 2 really well, and my mental health can just about meet the 2 and we feel quite peaceful and in harmony. I don't know if, like dance the edge between the safety and the complete and utter letting go of what could be. Because if you stay there thinking I can only just handle this, and you don't allow yourself the opportunity to grow into what it could be like with 3, then you'll never really know. And I say to everybody, like 2 to 3, going from 2 to 3 is far easier than 1 to 2. And in many ways, like, yes, there's moments of intensity with 3, but I find it like so amazing and so joyful that I couldn't imagine not having 3 now. But I also say that with a recognition that parenting is one of my highest values. So where I hit challenge in parenting, I don't really avoid it, I meet it. So because parenting and family are my highest values, I work the edges of the challenge in that place to be able to feel like I've got this. Whereas if for you, parenting and family maybe falls lower, a bit lower than your career, or it falls much lower than your finances, then coming to a decision to have more children will have those considerations front and center. And, if you're trying to, if you've got 2 parents who want to have, high profile careers, and you're trying to juggle 3 kids in all different care scenarios, and you're also trying to, really up-level your finances at the same time, then I would hazard a guess that you're likely to see quite a bit of challenge in the parenting aspect, simply by virtue of not being able to empower your time and knowledge in how to parent 3 or, more kids well in a way that everybody feels like they get their needs met. What would you say, Julie? I can see you nodding.
No, I'm just really enjoying your thought process. And I just, honestly, when you were talking about the, moving with being 3-week-old Sylvia and being like, nah, so done, to the Rumi quote of listening to your heart's desires, like, I just was really feeling into, I think, what extraordinary courageousness that required of you. And I don't think that I had that level of courageousness, and instead chose the opposite experience to what you had. So I was just sitting with how interesting, that was, but also really feeling into actually how extraordinarily courageous that is of you to choose your heart's yearning above relationship conflict. Now, perhaps, and, please feel free to correct me, that's a values thing, because family sits above relationship potentially. So you were willing to, in the hierarchy of values, honour family above relationship, because you were choosing relationship conflict in order to move through. To get that value met. Like, I was sitting with actually how extraordinarily courageous that is, and how many of us will instead choose to shy away from the potential experience, but potentially not a real one anyway, of rejection from our most intimate partner the moment that we say, I want something different to you.
Yeah. So that was conscious too, because I knew intuitively that to have a 3rd child would to challenge my relationship potentially more than it's been challenged before. And I also recognised that it would also require a change in my imprint. So my mum had said to me a number of times that she didn't think her marriage could handle 3 children at that time when we were little. And she'd had chronic fatigue, and like there was, a lot going on when we were small. And so I recognised that for me to go beyond my imprint and family patterning and ask my relationship to step in consciously to this growth, that it would require a lot of both of us to meet that. And so part of, challenging my husband to meet me there was the very beginning of the ways in which having 3 children asks us as a relationship to continue to grow and evolve in the way that our family needs, and also in the way that we as individuals need each other to meet us as we change and grow. So for me, yes, family was a higher value than relationship in that moment, but family was on the way to relationship becoming more empowered, because I could see all of the ways it would also serve us both and bring us into more alignment and connection and love. So I didn't see it was an either or. I saw it as a with, but that it's going to take work for it to feel like a with, right? If that makes sense.
No, I really understand it, but I think that's a very conscious and empowered choice to say, I see the I see that you will be challenged by my choice, but ultimately at the end of that is a very solid belief in that you will have what you want and he will join you. You're just in for the ride while he works that out.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think that's the art of the feminine, is to realize within all of us that on some level, you know that the masculine is here to give you whatever it is that your heart desires. On some level, each of us have some sort of touch point on I can make him do anything I want.
Yeah.
And some level, no matter how minuscule, of an understanding that light or shadow doesn't matter, that he's here and his desire is to give you what makes you happy, give you what keeps you in pleasure and joy, because you're witnessing your pleasure and joy through your body is what gives him the feed of pleasure and joy in his. So on some level, we all know that. How we use that is very different. But that's what I hear in you, is going, this absolute solidarity in, I know I want this and I need this, but I'm in for the journey. It doesn't have to be right now I need an instant gratifying yes, or the no produces feelings of repulsion for me. You were in the state of, yeah, we're going to get there, but we're going to become better lovers in the process of that. And I'm in for the stickiness.
Yeah. So I wasn't throwing at him my resentment of him not being able to be willing yet. Not at all. I was revealing my heart and saying, this is how I feel. I can see how you're feeling right now, but this is how I'm feeling. And I wasn't making him responsible for how I was feeling. I wasn't making him responsible for fixing my feeling, but simply saying, I can see where you're at, but right now I can't let go of this desire that I have. And that was simply how it was for a little while, until we could each just kind of meet each other and continue to come back into conversation and connection around coming together on that decision. So I think had I somehow made him responsible for my lack of fulfillment here, then it might not have gone that way, because then I would be throwing at him my dissatisfaction without recognizing that it's a meeting of two people and a meeting of two people's values, and how do we make this work for both of us. That was really how I, broached it. And similarly with the whole birth thing, he made it clear from the start that he didn't want to be really part of it. And I could have either blamed him for that or allowed him to be his authentic self and feel safe to tell me that, and me empower myself in the way that I wanted to be empowered. And that's what I did.
So his no doesn't become the suppression of your yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I think it's really conscious. I think it's really courageous and conscious work. I don't think that that's the normal experience, if there's such a thing anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's the majority. I think that's a skill set. I think that's a willingness in relationship that has advanced beyond win-lose. In order for you to win, I have to lose, or in order for me to win, you have to lose. That you are like, I know you're going to want this, win? And I'm going to love you through it. All of your resistance. And I think that's what we're trying to do in parenting, but we often then don't apply that same level of compassion and self-responsibility to our partners. We become children in our relationship, yet seek something different with our children. I find it very interesting.
It is very funny when you put that same lens, because ultimately it is, it's a very similar skill set. I mean, it's the same thing, like me asking my husband and to step up, and me being with his discomfort is the same thing that we ask our children, right? Like, I know that you can meet this, and I'm going to love you through your challenge here and help you find a way through it. Help you find a way for us to both get our needs met. And that my boundary here is not something that you're responsible for, but it's still my boundary.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I really love it. I think in vast contrast to that is my story. So I actually disagree with you slightly on that point, that what I witness is the biggest, hardest jump is 2 to 3, not 1 to 2.
Really?
I think
I found 1 to 2 really hard.
Well, so interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't know that there's a golden rule, but what I think I notice mostly out there is when you start moving to being, in inverted, commas, outnumbered, that becomes the point at which people begin to struggle. So 2 to 3 can be challenging because there's no longer the capacity for 1-to-1. At some level, there always has to be a 1-to-2 split, no matter which way it goes. And that is the thing that people struggle with the most, is what I witness. So I see that, just so you all know, as we're having this conversation.
And in fact, I need to put a pin in that too, because the fact is I'm talking about this having only had my third be the age of 1. So I may change, when each of my 3 kids are older and there is more juggle, right? There is more like clashing of needs. So certainly you've got the lens of looking at it for a longer period of time, and also potentially witnessing more people in that stage. So I bow to that too.
Yeah, I just want to put that disclaimer out there, is that we all have different experiences, but I understand that struggle, I think. I don't think it has to stay as a struggle, but I'm just saying I understand it. So just so you know. I think vastly contrasting is we had 2 children in quite quick succession, which was always my desire, to have them about 18 months apart. I always loved that age gap between my sister and I, and in siblings that we grew up with. So that was a very intentional choice for me / us. My husband is about the same age with his siblings, so that sat well for us. So we had 2 children within 18 months. And I knew I was so not done, but I was not the main earner in the family at that point in time. I was working. I always worked, but it was always, part-time and casual and, in and roundabouts life and kids. And I could see the strain, or I perceived the strain and the struggle of being the sole breadwinner and needing to be responsible for looking after now the 3 of us. So the thought of going to 4 of us pushed my husband into an area of extreme discomfort for him. Was how could he do that? And he wants all these things for our kids in their lifetime. And we were already planning private school, and we were already planning, the house. We just bought a house when Jade was born, because she was born here in it. And it was a financial upleveling. We had to change the car. We were buying a house. It was like these big financial decisions, and we were planning for private schools, family holidays, blah, blah, blah. We had the bigger vision. And I could completely see and understand on an intellectual level how it was foolhardy to have more children. It didn't make sense. And there were all the blogs floating around at that time that children cost you like $22 million or something like that, per child. I don't know. Like 20,000. Okay, in my head it's like millions. So we had all those. Per child, I don't know. Whatever it is. I'm going with $22 million because that's what it felt like at the time, And so, we were having these, in inverted commas, conscious conversations around, but what does it look like to really plan a life and plan what we want our children to have access to in this lifetime, and be responsible for that. And part of me was really comfortable with swallowing my desires in order for a more rational outcome. Like, that was my upbringing. I understood that. I understood and possibly felt more comfortable, not possibly, I did, felt more comfortable in the suppression of my desire than in the meeting of it, because that was what I'd been trained to be. So the swallowing of that hurt and the rationalizing made sense. So that's how we continued on. And after Jade, then I became a doula and was working with women in birth. So I was like, okay, well, maybe this is the fix. I get to live vicariously through other women's experiences of birth and babies, and I still get that fulfilled within me. And I got back, I was lecturing at uni then, and my career was picking up again. And I had initiated a business that was a really successful business, which was naturopathic birth then, where I was taking on couples for birth and health consultations during the process of their pregnancy. So it was a really successful business model and I was loving it. The juggle with kids was really hard because being on call is really hard with little people when you have a husband who works corporate and can't just take time off work. And I had no support system. We didn't have parents that were involved. So that created a little bit of challenge between us. That's a side note, but I'm trying to put myself back in that time. So I can see financially earning more, heading places, makes sense. Kids are tracking along. We're going really well. But there's still this part of me that is deeply yearning for a third. Still, it hasn't left my body. Still, it hasn't left my heart. Still, I know I want it. But I keep trying to convince myself that I don't and that it's foolish and all of the reasons why it's not a financially savvy decision. And I wanted to be financially savvy. I've always been this lifetime trying to work on that. So I can see how that fitted in easily because that was the cultural narrative. And the conversations I had with my husband, I was like, yeah, I get it. I really do get it. I get it. But I get it. I can live with that. I can live with this pain stone in the bottom of my heart. I can live with that. And then at some point I was like, oh, that's fucking it. I just, it's feast or famine, isn't it? I just want another baby. And if it just happens to be an accident, then I don't have to take any responsibility for it. And I know that he'll roll with it.
I can't even imagine you doing that.
Oh, can't you? No, I was pretty good with that.
Not Julie now.
Not Julie now. No, but Julie then, like 8 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. Because I couldn't own my own heart's desires then either. I couldn't say with a level of absolute comfort and certainty and passion that I want what I want and I want more. I couldn't say any of those things because scarcity was far more comfortable than abundance. Way more.
So to live in scarcity.
Oh man, to live in scarcity was my home. And to live in anything that looked like more was fucking terrifying. So I can totally see why if I don't really own it, then I don't really have to own that discomfort, Anyway, so I kind of planned it out in my head. And if you've listened to our miscarriage story podcast, you know this already, but I'll quickly rehash. I was going on a horseback winery tour with a girlfriend and I was like, I know I'm going to get smashed and I'm coming home. And he was really like, had booked in a vasectomy. So that's how serious he was and how much I was like knowing it had to be an accident or, it was done for life. And I was like, he was really particular about not having accidents and wearing condoms and, blah, blah, blah. So he was like really, really like avoiding having another baby. So I was also like, well, if I'm just drunk and just all over him, then he just can't resist. Still a little bit ashamed that this is my thought process, but here we go.
I don't think I've even heard this full story.
Haven't you?
No.
So that's what I did. I had a really fun horseback winery tour, although in my head I'm like, how does that make sense? Horses and drunkenness. I don't understand how that makes sense to anybody. But that is what we did. Yeah. So I came home really happy. And I remember this moment where he's like, oh, and I'm like, it's so fine. Like I knew. I can literally, like our memories are not false, but I can remember that moment where I used my feminine manipulation in shadow, not in light. Because on some level, we all know that he'll do whatever we want him to do. The difference is it on his journey or not? That wasn't. That was very shadowy feminine. But that's what I did. And I did get pregnant. So it was that baby that I witnessed him move through, okay, we're doing this. I can do this with you. And we started to slip into easier conversations around the third. So I kind of avoided the pain of what you went through, Bridget, of sitting with his discomfort by virtue of the fact that there was nothing we could do, and he was now in the role of protecting his woman and family, and that I kind of bypassed that, though I did not. So this is the thing, right? You actually never escape the challenge. It just morphs form. So that baby was the one that I had a miscarriage at 12 weeks that I found out in the 12-week scan, expecting a live baby for, and led on to an enormous journey and healing process. And it actually shattered both of us. Like, we were both just torn open by virtue of, I think we had just embraced this new version of life and seen it open. And so all of the bullshit stories around scarcity and money and all of it, it didn't even matter anymore. And then it was ripped away from us, or that was the perception of it. And so we felt this gaping hole. And it was from that place, in the gaping hole, that we really connected with the absolute truth. And I was absolutely honest for the first time, probably even with myself, because the pain was so big. I could only be more honest, you know, with how much I wanted that. And he too, you know, I think all of those stories were from his childhood. He's a scarcity childhood, but in a different version to me. And the being level-headed is a safety net for him, though it may not be exactly the life that he desires. It just makes more sense. You know, this kind of stoic, craggly, Scroogey kind of vibe. And still I play with those edges with him even now, but now I can see it, and that's a story for another day. Anyway, so we both got on board, and really consciously then I went on a path of investing in my body and my desires and my heart in a way that I had never allowed myself before. Sometimes I think you have to go through death in order to birth new life within ourselves. And then we consciously conceived, so literally consciously had the conception, knew fully with presence exactly what was happening and that we were pregnant, and that was Lola's, that was our third. And I gave up work to have this really conscious, present pregnancy because it was, in inverted commas, my last one. And we had been through just what felt like a really horrendous death experience that I wanted to honor the life that had chosen us out of that. And so that was actually a really beautiful healing bubble for us. And there's not a thing that I would change about that, because it was everything that I wanted, I gave myself. Everything. Every bit of juice, every bit of presence, every bit of giving up every other part of my life in order to experience the fullness of our family. I did it. Like, if I could think of one time when I was so utterly and totally absorbed and absolved of everything and in the truth of my highest value, it would be that moment. It would be that pregnancy with Lola. It was extraordinary. I loved it. And I think it created enormous foundations of strength that actually made our step into having a third baby really easeful, because her first year of life was easeful. She got hard after that because she didn't move. And that's, you know, everyone knows that story. But that first year of life was like fucking bliss. Like, having a third child was like a snap for us. It was divine. She was delicious. This whole, like, she just wanted to sleep in a cot and I wanted to co-sleep, and she just slept. She slept all night. She slept through the night by the time she was 8 months old. It was like, she was like dream experience.
Like a unicorn baby.
She was just magic. But I wonder how much of that was because we had done all of the hard yards in the lead up to her soul entering this earth. You know, like I don't think that they're separate. We processed a fucking shit ton in her pregnancy and lead up to her conception, like so much. And the truth is you don't avoid it. So either you're going to deal with it consciously or it's going to find you. If it doesn't find you in conception, it finds you in pregnancy. If it doesn't find you in pregnancy, it'll find you in birth. If it doesn't find you in birth, it'll find you in the newborn. Like you don't ever escape it. So you just get to choose it if you want to. So that was our third, and it was delicious and beautiful, and I loved it. And then I thought we were done. So when I think about that, what I wish is that you don't choose what I chose. That's what I wish. Because there was so much shadow and swallowing of my truest self that was more painful and far less abundant and ecstatic than when I fully honored the truth of who I was and was witnessed by my partner in that. And we created this life that was the truest version of me, of us. Like, I think if I had have stayed believing the bullshit that I had in my head about finances and costs and life looking like this, I don't know, employee trajectory, I think half of me would have died. I would have withered up and have been 70 and looked back and been one of those women that would say to her grandchild, don't wait, don't not have what you want, have more babies. And I thought, I can't be that.
I've got tingles then. Yeah.
I can't be that. That's not the truth of who I am. But I had to really fucking process. And it was that was the very clear line in the sand in my life when I track it back, where I let go of my childhood and my family lineage programming and chose my own. That's fucking beautiful.
That is courageous. Because it's constant work. It's constant work to choose outside of your lineage and to choose beyond the imprint.
Yeah, 100%. So that was baby number 3. So please don't be in shadow like I was. And please don't manipulate in shadow like I did. And please gain wisdom from my story and choose a path that is more compassionate than what I chose, I think. More like Bridget's story. So then we come to baby number 4. And there's a beautiful podcast on that. It's still one of my favorites in here, which is Accepting the Unexpected. I think that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
I love that one because I just never in my life would I have thought I would be the woman that would have 4 children. And I can't tell you, like, for every way that Lola was easy, Gwen is fucking easier. Like, having 4 children, I parent way less than what I did with baby 1 and 2. Way less. Because, and I think also because I had that huge age gap. So there's like nearly 7 and 9 years between 1 and 2 and number 3, is that they're so much older that they become like another parent to these 2 younger children. And so there's always this beautiful fluid dynamic between who's interacting and and because I so consciously parented 1 and 2, they had this skill set for meeting emotional states, understanding and interpreting a younger person's experience that meant they were like another influencer like me in the house. And I could step back and they can step up. And there's so much more joy. I can't tell you, with every baby, it is like an explosion of joy in my house. And this is the thing with abundance, is we think it's still in this scarcity. There's only so much and no more. And the truth is, that's fucking bullshit. Is every time you say yes to your heart and it's a truth, more abundance opens. So with every baby, my wage has increased. It hasn't decreased. That's not an accident. So with me, baby 1 and 2, you're right, we should plan. We should, you know, stick with what we've got and work out how to spend our money more wisely, blah, blah, blah. Like, finances, be fucking damned. I couldn't have planned it, but that is what has happened. With every baby, my finances have up-leveled. That is not an accident. The joy in my home has up-leveled. The experience of intimacy with my partner has up-leveled. So I don't want there to be this conception of the mainstream, which is, well, win-lose. Because that's not true. That's not how I see the world.
It's so reductionist, right? And it's so, like, it's capping off your potential in so many ways. It's saying that there's only this much when we live in an infinite universe, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, it all comes down to how much you're willing to grow yourself up in each of those areas. Right. And like, you know, for all of those, you've stepped in and gone, I want more here. So what does it look like?
Exactly.
To have more here?
Exactly. Right. Turns out more is not a dirty word, but I had to learn that. And I had to let go of shit to learn that. Sometimes it's often more the excavating, isn't it, than what you're putting in. Probably not even maybe. It's the excavation. So, you know, when it comes to thinking about more, I totally get we're all going to make decisions that are based on what is most meaningful to us, which, as Bridget has said, will be your values and the hierarchy in which they exist, and seeing the linking between all of those 100%. But also, my answer will always be, if family is a top value for you, it's in your top 3, then yes, would always be my answer. Because while there's a longing, there's an abundance that's as yet untapped. So I'm far more luscious and juicy with 4 children than what I was with 1 or 2. And everything is more because I said yes to more in a really truthful, wholehearted way. And of course there's bumps, and of course there's hard parts. But like Bridget said, when it's in your top values and you can link it to being something meaningful, this upskills my relationship, this upskills my parenting, this upskills the skill set that I use in work or friendship or life or finances. I don't see them as separate skill sets. So whenever there's a challenge, I'm like, okay, cool. What am I learning here? So yes is for me, but how do, in response to our listener, how do you know when it's a full-bodied yes? I think there's always a leap of faith, because if we always waited for when all of the ducks were in the row, we'd never take leaps and do anything. And all of the most courageous experiences in this life require a leap without certainty at some point. And instead of moving towards a trust of the faith that exists, regardless of the faith that you might see outside of you in a supreme being or divine or God or whatever, there's a faith at the very center of your heart that you learn to listen to and trust and leap off the cliff for, because you know you will build your wings on the way, because it exists in the center of your heart for a reason. It's that faith. It's the faith in the center of your heart, not even a faith that's bigger than you. So that's how I know it's a full-bodied yes, is if my heart is yearning and I'm willing to have conscious conversations and sit in my truth and face the discomfort that comes up around me and within me when I honor my truth, because that is what happens, because it's an up-leveling, then it's always ecstatic. It's not a question. And because I build the evidence for that, I trust it more and more. What would you say, Bridge?
And I'd also say that when you hit challenges and when you hit the bumps in those conversations with your partner, ask yourself, like, be humble enough and open enough and willing to feel the searing ache of the pain of it, to sit with it long enough to find what it's there for. So, for example, like, I remember early on in the conversations with my husband about having 3, like, you know, I was also trying to work a lot. You know, it was when I was doing like some really big events. And, you know, we had like a 1-year-old, and he said to me once, he's like, how do you possibly think we're going to have 3? Like, you can't manage with 2. How are we going to have 3? And like that, like ripped my heart out. But then I was like, okay, how can I take that inward and see his perspective, and also recognize that he is actually an unheard part of me? Like, if I'm bringing that into my awareness, his words into my awareness, how is that me speaking to me? Because if the world is our mirror, he's also a piece of me that I haven't acknowledged, that I'm asking myself to hear. So what does my life need to look like in order to feel like I can do 3? What needs to shift and change? What needs to be delegated? What needs to be, you know, opened up and moved through and discarded or transformed to make room and possibility for 3, you know, be there. And not, you know, close down and recoil and, you know, like harden your heart because of the challenge. Ask why it's there and stay with it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So we're going to wrap up. We've been talking for a really long time. So I really do hope, dear listener, that gave you some insight into where to for you. We would love to hear from anyone that it touched your heart or soul, and we would love to know what spoke to you, or perhaps what reached you, or if you'd like to know something more. So please get in touch with us via Instagram or Facebook, both Nourishing the Mother, or send us an email, connect@nourishingthemother.com.au. Thank you very much for spending your listening time with us. We recognise how precious that is, particularly in the chaos of the world right now. So I really appreciate you spending time with us. If you would love a container where you do continue your own work and processing with weekly workshops, then that's Soul Driven Motherhood. So you can check that out on, again, any of our platforms and website. Next week, we're beginning a 4-week workshop on, what are we calling it? Secret Sauce.
Secret Sauce.
So we're starting with values, moving into shadow, overwhelm, and feminine awakening. So if you would love to be workshopped through that in a community of women who think just like you and are so willing and open to find all of the pieces of them, then Soul Driven Motherhood is absolutely your online platform for that. And for just $39 for the entire month, it's really pretty extraordinary as an energetic plug-in. So please go and check that out.
Yeah. And with you, Jules?
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com, and you, Bridge?
Suburban.com. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.